This week, as the number of immigrants told to leave the United States tops 1 million, the president suggests closing the country.
We are fixing and building walls now, but we need much more money. We're doing the job right. We're going to do the job. And we may have to close up our country to get this straight, because we either have a country or we don't. And you can't allow people to pour into our country.
Meanwhile, his Attorney General Jeff Sessions warns they will separate more children from their parents at the U.S.-Mexico border.
If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law.
And while the administration's assault on immigration gathers pace, my conversation with a woman who's leading the charge in the courtroom to protect the rights of immigrants and refugees.
We are standing up to the President of the United States, and we're telling him, no, you are not going to go after immigrants. You're not going to go after refugees. We have U.S. laws. We have the Constitution that protects our rights, and we are going to fight for them.
From the National Immigration Forum, I'm Ali Noorani with Only in America. Last week, the Department of Homeland Security canceled the temporary legal status of some 57,000 Hondurans. Add that number to the thousands of Haitians and Salvadorans with temporary protected status, or TPS, already given 18 months to get out, plus this almost 700,000 Dreamers under the DACA program, and the administration has, as the Washington Post put it, stamped an expiration date on the residency of more than 1 million immigrants. The Post also points out that there are 270,000 U.S. citizen children of people with TPS. Those children will have to leave the country with their parents, or they will be separated from their parents. Let me be clear. These are U.S. citizen children who will be asked to leave the country if they want to remain with their parents. Speaking of children, since last October, 700 have been taken from adults at the border. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, despite the presence of hecklers, seemed quite pleased to announce that more families will be divided under his zero-tolerance policy.
If you cross the border unlawfully, then we will prosecute you. It's that simple. If you smuggle illegal aliens across our border, then we will prosecute you. If you are smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you. And that child may be separated from you as required by law. If you make false statements to an immigration officer or file a fraudulent asylum claim, that's a felony. If you help others do so, that's a felony also. You're going to the jail. So if you're going to come to this country, come here legally. Don't come here illegally.
And with a midweek scoop, the Washington Post exposed how the Trump administration ignored the advice of senior U.S. diplomats in ending TPS for hundreds of thousands of people. The story is more evidence the administration is not making immigration policy as much as it is ending the very idea of immigration. And the cruel irony of ending legal status for hundreds of thousands of taxpayers to send them to some of the most dangerous countries in the world, countries that people are literally fleeing, frankly, is beyond the pale. Whether we are building a wall, closing the country, or expelling people who've lived in America for decades, these are game-changing days for the country. But in a moment, my conversation with one of the leading immigrant rights lawyers in the country. I'm Ali Noorani.
Support for the National Immigration Forum comes from the James Irvine Foundation, expanding opportunity for the people of California, and from the Carnegie Corporation of New York, established in 1911 by Andrew Carnegie to promote the advancement and diffusion of knowledge and understanding.
During this 2018 commemoration of Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month and everything that's going on in our country, I can't think of a better person to talk to than Cecillia Wang, a Deputy Legal Director at the National Office of the American Civil Liberties Union. Cecillia also directs the Center for Democracy, which encompasses the ACLU's work on immigrant rights, voting rights, national security, and human rights. While our conversation got into the legal questions of the day, Where we started was the most interesting. Cecillia didn't fall into immigrant rights law on accident. Rather, we started our conversation going back to the Japanese internment camps and the role of Japanese American lawyers in fighting back.
My journey to the ACLU and to working in the immigrants' rights movement actually goes back to when I was a college student, an undergrad at UC Berkeley. I was really motivated to go to law school in the first place by the effort by Japanese American lawyers in the 1980s to get redress and reparations for the internment, the incarceration of Japanese Americans during World War II. So what's really interesting about that is that, now in 2017 and 2018, with the Trump administration rolling out the Muslim ban and there are other immigration policies, I feel like I've come full circle with all the echoes of Japanese American incarceration during World War II coming to the fore again in U.S. policy through President Trump's Muslim ban orders. So I guess the journey's come around.
As you were learning more about the detention of the Japanese American community at that point in time, was there a moment or something that you read that said, okay, this is what I want to do?
There was actually a documentary that was made by the niece of Min Yasui, one of the three Japanese Americans who challenged the curfew and incarceration orders against Japanese Americans during World War II. It was a documentary that was shown in the Asian American Studies classes at Cal, and I saw it as an undergrad and was really struck by the ways in which racism infected U.S. policymaking. And I was really struck by how Min Yasui was this heroic, but also kind of a lone figure, along with Fred Korematsu and Gordon Hirabayashi. They took enormous personal risks in order to stand up for what was right. And similarly, the next generation of Japanese Americans who were attorneys, Dale Minami, Don Tamaki, and many, many others, Peter Irons, the historian, and they banded together in order to try to fix this 40-year-old injustice and went into federal court to try to overturn the convictions of these men for violating the curfew and incarceration orders. And that really captured my imagination and made me think, that's what I want to do with my life, go and fight for what's right and try to win justice and stand up for equality in this country, our better ideals as they've been stated in the U.S. Constitution, which, as Langston Hughes said so eloquently, have never really been a reality. It always takes a struggle. And so I thought that by becoming a lawyer and by engaging in civil rights work and work on behalf of immigrant communities, that I could do my part to try to get to the America that we really want to be and want to live up to.
So then over the last year, and let's talk specifically about the Muslim ban, as you are kind of thinking through the legal strategy to, fight this ban, is there a lawyer from that time that is always on your mind?
What comes through most strongly for me, both in our current efforts to overturn Trump's Muslim ban orders and in earlier efforts that have inspired me personally as a lawyer, is that it really takes a group effort. It's an enormous team of people, not just lawyers, not even primarily lawyers, but also the clients. It takes enormous bravery to come forward as an individual to say, I'm going to stand up for what's right and stand up for myself and for my community and my family and fight against the powers that be, to fight against the most powerful people in the world, including the President of the United States. And what's also been really inspiring about our most current round of litigation against Trump's Muslim ban orders is he came down with the executive order on the Friday of his first week in office on January 27th, 2017. And we had been expecting it. By we, I mean organizations in the immigrants' rights movement and refugee resettlement organizations. So we were watching and waiting, and the order actually was leaked to the press before we even got a copy of it. And it was on a Friday in the evening. And we had prepared, along with other organizations, the National Immigration Law Center, the Yale Law School's Worker and Immigrants' Rights Clinic, and the International Refugee Assistance Project. And there were a lot of organizations who were ready for this and had prepared for it. And when IRAP had two clients who were coming in at JFK Airport in New York, we all sprang into action to try to bring a lawsuit to challenge the president's executive order. But what has been critical right from the beginning and throughout the past year and 4 months of the Trump administration in this fight is that the very next day after President Trump signed his initial executive order trying to ban Muslim immigration, we saw thousands and thousands of people from American communities around the country just showing up at airports. And this didn't just happen because of organizing that happened because of Make the Road and the New York Immigrant Coalition in New York. It also happened spontaneously in smaller airports all around the United States. And lawyers showed up to do what they could do to help. And regular people showed up in throngs to say, we are going to stand up with immigrants and refugees and people who are just visiting family members or coming to the United States on their previously approved visas. And we're not going to stand for the efforts of the president to try to overturn the rule of law and the immigration systems that we have. We're just not going to stand for this message of unwelcome that the president is trying to send out. That upswelling of popular support for immigrants and refugees and for the better American values was really inspiring. And I think that is ultimately where we see the progress from World War II with the incarceration of Japanese Americans until today. What we see is regular people around the country who are empowered to stand up for what's right and to stand up for the truth, because at heart, the president's policies on the Muslim ban and on other immigration issues has been based on lies and on an effort to mislead the American public and to spread fear. And so I think that with the tools that masses of the American people have today to organize and to counteract the misleading information or misinformation that's been put out by President Trump and other anti-immigrant activists and policymakers, I feel confident. I have the sense that things are changing, that we are getting closer and closer to making American ideals a reality.
We could talk for days on just what an amazing, and I mean that both in a good way and a negative way, the last year and a half has been. But that's a different podcast. So let's fast forward, if you don't mind, to last week. The Supreme Court heard oral arguments on the Muslim ban and wanted to ask you to kind of provide a summary and your best sense of kind of what happens from here. And, where do you think the court will land?
The issues really come down to this in the Supreme Court. The president's order is illegal in several different ways. First, the order is illegal because it's contrary to the laws that Congress has enacted. So going back to 1965, Congress decided that they were going to do a pretty thorough renovation of our country's immigration system, which previously had been based on national origin quotas that more or less explicitly tried to maintain the racial and ethnic demographics of the United States. So in 1965, Congress said, we're going to do away with those national origin quotas, and we're going to move to a system where the things we value, the things we're going to prioritize in setting immigration rules are, do you have family ties to someone who's in the United States? And do you have employment prospects? We're going to look at people as individuals rather than based on their nationality or where they come from in the world. That was a pretty significant change in the immigration system. And so the first way in which Trump's Muslim ban orders in all three versions is illegal is that it's trying to go back to a pre-civil rights era vision for American immigration policy that is based on national origin quotas. And in this case, his all three versions of his order banned approximately 150 million people from countries that are predominantly Muslim in their demographics. The second way in which the president's Muslim ban orders violated the laws passed by Congress is that he really took a narrow authorization that Congress has given the president to temporarily suspend the immigration of certain groups of immigrants and turn that into a vast rewriting of the immigration system, right? And so what we see here is that the president has, number one, decided to discriminate on the basis of nationality. And two, has decided to take a narrow authorization that Congress has given him to suspend immigration based on a finding that someone's entry would be detrimental to the United States, and just driven an enormous truck through it in order to block the immigration of people from certain predominantly Muslim countries. And then the third way in which the president's Muslim ban orders violates the law is that we all know, as he pointed out, that what all three versions of the Muslim ban have done is to carry out his campaign promise to bring about a total and complete shutdown of Muslim immigration to the United States. And, what we've seen most recently, right after the Supreme Court argument last week, is that while the government's lawyers, the Solicitor General of the United States, said that the president has repudiated his original stated intent of blocking Muslim immigration, in fact, the president has consistently doubled down on what he promised as a candidate. And since taking office, through all three iterations of the Muslim ban, the president has said, I am going to carry out my ban. It's going to be the toughest version you've seen yet. He has tweeted out these really extreme white nationalist anti-Muslim propaganda videos. And after the Supreme Court argument, he said he has nothing to apologize for. So you got to give Trump credit where credit is due. He's been very clear and very honest and consistent about his intent to block Muslim immigration.
It doesn't exactly sound like he's repudiated it.
To the contrary, right? He's been told, his lawyers have walked into court throughout the past year and a quarter and have said, look, the president may have said that as a candidate, but courts, you close your eyes. Don't look at what close your ears. Don't listen to what the president says about the purpose of his executive orders and proclamation. Just focus on the fact that now with the third version, there's been this kind of worldwide review of different countries' national security and document management practices. But in fact, the president has been very clear, and he's, frankly made it quite difficult for Justice Department lawyers to walk into court and try to tell the courts the president has no intent to ban Muslim immigration, when in fact he's saying it from every platform he has.
The court is due to make a decision by the end of June. How do you think this will play out, kind of given the way the court is these days?
What we saw during the argument last week is that the justices are troubled by the position that the government is taking. The president has made it very difficult for the courts. The courts traditionally give the political branches, both the president and Congress, quite a bit of leeway in deciding on immigration policy, right? But what you have here is a president who is doing something that's contrary to what Congress enacted. That, I think, is really critical to what's going to happen ultimately with the Supreme Court's decision on the Muslim ban. They're looking not at a president who's acting consistently with Congress as the political branches, together saying we want to carry out this immigration policy. It's a president going against what Congress wants. I think that is troubling to at least some of the justices, as they expressed, to the extent you can glean what they're thinking from the questions.
So let's switch gears a little bit here. Yesterday, Texas followed through on their threat to file suit against the administration against, in essence, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, DACA. Initially, they made this threat to file suit last September. I think that Trump, in many ways, rescinded DACA as a program in response to that threat. But, how does this play out? Not necessarily even with the details of kind of that lawsuit, but, you now have multiple suits kind of moving through the system that could reach very different conclusions based on where they're heard.
Texas has led the way, joining forces with President Trump in trying to attack immigrant and refugee communities and families around the country. And this most recent lawsuit filed yesterday against the DACA program is just the latest iteration of that, with Texas trying to attack immigrants. And, what's interesting about it is that two different federal courts have now have temporarily blocked the president's rescission of DACA. And so, Texas is now kind of a Johnny-come-lately, coming in here, filing a lawsuit in their favorite venue, in Texas and is trying to now strike down DACA the same way that they attempted to. They went in there and wanted to challenge all kinds of immigration policies of the previous administration. And, they can't now change the 2 federal court orders that are already in place that block the rescission of DACA. And, it's going to be kind of the bigger picture is going to be an interesting test because clearly anti-immigrant policymakers like Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, are placing a political bet with this litigation. They're betting that it's in the interests, in their political interests, to attack immigrant communities. In this case, people who are American except on paper, right? These are America's best and brightest young people who have come here as kids and have something to contribute to the United States, who are contributing to the United States and to communities around our country. And this all-out attack on this group of immigrants, like their attack on people who have been in the country for many years, their sort of mass deportation efforts, carrying out these extraordinarily abusive raids in American communities, going after local government officials in California and elsewhere because of political disagreement with Trump administration policies. We'll see how that comes out for them. I think, the litigation, they're going to be hard pressed to try to change what other courts have already done with respect to DACA. But in the long run, I think that they're going to find that they've placed their bets on the wrong horse here.
The last issue I wanted to talk to you about is with respect to the private sector cooperating with immigration enforcement. Over the last 6 months, there have been reports of Motel 6, Greyhound, having some level of cooperation with immigration enforcement. I know that you all have been really involved in pushing back on the legal front regarding that sort of cooperation. But I was wondering if you could kind of break that down for us.
These private companies that are in the business of providing public accommodations and transportation services are really facilitating violations of people's basic Fourth Amendment rights. And in many cases, it's been reported that agents come on board and are doing their interrogations and their detentions in a racially discriminatory way, going after brown and black folks on buses or trains or staying in these places. And so it's a disturbing thing to know that as anyone, whether you're a U.S. citizen, a lawful immigrant, or someone who's here without status, you could be going about your own business, paying your money for a bus ticket or a train ticket or for a hotel for the night, and suddenly be confronted with a situation where an agent is detaining you and interrogating you and searching your belongings. And that is, plainly illegal. And I think that these private businesses that have been facilitating agents in doing this kind of illegal immigration enforcement, they're going to regret that. If we are going to let government agents do whatever they want in the name of immigration enforcement, our rights are going to be infringed. And that's ultimately where I think we're going to see an end to these kinds of draconian immigration enforcement tactics.
Cecillia, thank you so much. I've got 25 more questions for you, but I do have one more question for you, and we're gonna try to end this on a little bit of a higher note than we've been headed. So the podcast is called Only in America, and so my last request of you is to finish this sentence: Only in America. ...
Only in America could you see the upswelling of popular support for immigrants and refugees. And only in America would you see such a wide-ranging support by lawyers, by regular people to say, we're standing up to the President of the United States and we're telling him, no, you are not going to go after immigrants. You're not going to go after refugees. We have U.S. laws. We have the Constitution that protects our rights, and we are going to fight for them.
There's more about Cecillia Wang and her work on behalf of immigrants at immigrationforum.org. While you're there, why not subscribe to Only in America? and tell a friend about the podcast. Only in America is produced by Emily Chow and Regina Medina. The executive producer is Kathleen Farrell. I'm Ali Nirani. Talk to you next week.